And yeah, so the topic of the day is making a great first impression with your portfolio. For a little context, we wanted to do some portfolio related event or content at the beginning of the year. It's always a hot topic, and I think the genesis of this idea specifically is at Designlab we have a feed of the portfolios that are coming through for approval in UX Academy. We have a feed of alumni and folks who've gotten jobs, and just being on that feed, and really noticing some trends and some things that we see of people who are successfully getting jobs. And then also thinking about this as a marketer, right? Like, it's a competitive market. And the number one reason why people don't get jobs is because they don't get through that initial screening process, right? Because the vast majority of people get kind of crossed out of a role early in the process, right? Like, only a small percentage of applicants are going to get interviews or get a second look. And so how do you make yourself or increase the likelihood of yourself being part of that smaller percentage? That's the topic of the day. So want to just start with, for Chrissy and Jacques, in your experience, I'm assuming you guys have looked at many portfolios in the context of hiring or in the context of people joining your team. And my guess is, you can't spend 20 minutes on each because there's too many. What are the things at the top of your list that you guys look for when you're seeing portfolios in that very initial stage, right? Like, how do you quickly go through to say, do I want to talk, do I want to dive deeper? Do I want to, double click? Do I want to spend more time on this candidate?
Is you going to go first or me go first?
I'm going to let you go first, Jacques, and then I'm formulating my thought in my head.
Right. I can definitely say the first impression, as says in the title of this event, makes a huge difference. When you first land on the portfolio, you can kind of see the level of craft. So if I see a mock-up of something in one of the tiles that lead into one of the case studies, if I see alignment issues, if I see margins that are not aligned, if I see typography that's not, that doesn't have a hierarchy, if I have these types of like fundamental design elements off gate, then I don't even want to spend time clicking into the case study because it didn't catch my eye. So I think it's just like watching like a trailer of a movie, right? If the trailer doesn't catch your eye, you don't want to go watch the movie. If I see the front page of your portfolio isn't clean and looks professional, then I'm not going to spend the time to even dig in deeper to the case studies.
Yeah, I think Jacques brings up some really excellent points about that first impression about you, the fundamentals that you're really checking for. There's a couple of things I look for right off the gate. I also look for a match for the position. If I'm looking for a researcher or a UXer or a visual designer, I go straight to that part of your portfolio. For example, if you've got a use case and it's a UX research position I'm looking at, I will go to your research and I'm going to have a look at that and I'm going to check whether that's right. If it's a UX position, I'm in your wireframes, I'm in your user flows, and I'm doing a check. I'm doing this in about 60 seconds flat. I'm coming into your site. And the reason I can do that is because I've seen hundreds, if not thousands of portfolios. I've been in this game 20 years. So I know how to do that. And I can spot those inconsistencies that Jacques says within a couple of seconds, that alignment. I'm also checking that you are who you say you are. So a couple of those very quick checks on your resume versus your LinkedIn. So I actually do that as well. I do. And I'm literally there for about 5 seconds. And I'm looking at your LinkedIn, looking at your resume, and I'm going, check. Okay, throw it away. And then I'm back in your portfolio. And I do that. I don't know about you, Jacques, but I spend about 60 to 90 seconds on a review. And then I'm done in that first impression. What about you?
Definitely. I think that's a solid estimate of time. I think one thing as well is a wall of text. So I think a lot of times some students or even people who are not Designlab students, but just anyone, they might have a wall of text and they have a lot of information. It's really, really good information, but it's just too much and I feel overwhelmed and it's just not formatted in a way. So I think it's all about presentation and just taking the time to think about your craft, right? So I think that's one thing, just based on what you said. Yeah.
And I guess to build, maybe kind of build off that, you're talking about the craft, you're talking about kind of looking specifically at, is the person a fit for the role? Kind of do you guys read the text, right? You go into most people's portfolio, there's some headline text, there's some intro. Any thoughts or recommendations related to how people might want to think about approaching that space, given that it's something most people are going to see because it's the first thing that's front and center often?
It's a good one.
Yeah.
I think your titles are really important. So your H1s, your header ones, you're going to go through those and make sure that those are descriptive as to what's actually happening underneath. And maybe the second thing, maybe I'll pause here and let Jacques say something.
I would say industry specific. So something that I've spoken about with my students from Designlab is if you're trying to get a job in a certain industry, then put those projects at the top, at the forefront. So for example, one of my students is in a certain area where there's a lot of big corporate companies that have headquarters in that city, and they would like to work for one of those companies. So in their case studies, they focus their Designlab case studies on those types of industry projects and put those front and center. So whenever they do that interview, it catches their eye. And I've had experience doing that as well, where I was interviewing in the past for a certain type of industry, and that putting that case study front and center caught their eye. And they told me specifically when I was interviewing that we looked at that particular case study. It was relevant to the job I was interviewing for.
Yeah, and Ken said something really nice about the walls of text. I think those definitely don't work. However, I will give one caveat to this, which is if you get past the initial screening, what I do is I send one of my team members to have a look at your portfolio after I've passed it for review. And what happens is they will spend a lot longer checking you out. So although I'm spending 90 seconds, my team member might spend a lot more, and they are going to read what's in there. So with that in mind, be mindful not to give walls of text, but also be careful not to give so little you give nothing. So it's a balancing act to do. You've got to be descriptive. You've got to say what you need to say. Don't talk around a topic, just make the statement. And the challenge back to your portfolio is, as much as possible, make the statement. Don't make the explanation. Say what's there and why, and don't talk about a lot of other things around it. Just treat it like it's actually a presentation that you're having to explain to somebody. You're not there to educate them on, exactly what is an affinity map. You're there to tell them what you learned and why. Because that's what my team's looking to know. Anyway,
two things I noticed. Again, not a designer, but have in this role just looked at a lot of these portfolios and want to get your guys' take on. Is there something to this? I think one of the things I've seen in terms of the way people are describing themselves is the portfolios of the folks who are successful, in processes tend to differentiate them and make them kind of memorable in a way, right? And I think people can do this in a whole range of ways, right? Because people have a unique backgrounds. The contrast is I do also see a lot of portfolios where people are saying things that feel very cookie cutter, right? Like I build user-friendly experiences for digital products, right? Or stuff like that. So that's kind of one, like in terms of really taking what's unique about them and making that very obvious. And the second piece I've also noticed is with successful folks who are successful is there is a tendency to talk about impact. Now, I know obviously if people are earlier in their career process, they haven't necessarily had impact, so it's hard. But even if they're not talking about actual impact they've had, talk about mention impact as something that they work against, right? Versus you see a lot of portfolios that approach design almost as if they're just about the user, right? And that there is no business or there is no organization. Reactions to that, right? Those are just like two things as a non-designer I've seen. Does that resonate or am I wrong on something?
Yeah, I'm going to let Jacques go first here.
Sure. Yes. Well, I would say don't let that hold you back, because a lot of times, people are graduating from Designlab and you haven't had the opportunity to create business impact yet, but don't let that stop you. Go out and find the opportunity. Go out and find a small local business in your area who doesn't have a website or who has a really bad website, and offer that to them, even if it's for free or even if it's for very inexpensive. Just go out there and get the experience and make the opportunity for yourself so that you can put on your resume and your portfolio that you created that business impact. So that's what I always recommend.
Yeah. And I think I'm going to take a slightly different angle to it, which is I agree wholeheartedly with Jacques, by the way. Go find those small companies or charities that you can work for and prove that you have real cases in your portfolio. The other thing I'll say is showing that you understand the business problem is actually a big part of what you can do, which is not just say the user wants this, so therefore we do it. Can you articulate the fact that this might be too expensive a piece for the return on the investment of the design? Do you understand how to play those parts together and explain that the business needs something improved and design is there to provide it with the user input? It's almost like it's that three-part problem. You've got user needs, you've got business needs, you've got tech needs, and you have to be able to balance the business needs with the user needs. And can you show that in your work? I'm always looking for that. I love seeing business canvas, for example, inside a portfolio. Do you understand how the business operates, how they make their money, and your role that you've got to play there? I actually really like seeing those things. But maybe Jacques has some other things that he likes to see in portfolios from a business point of view.
Definitely, yes. I mean, I always kind of pride myself in being more than just a designer, right? Like we're not. You don't feel like you have to put yourself in a box of just being a designer. We can think about things from a business perspective. We can think about things from a technology perspective. And like you said, think about how does the business make money and what is my role in that? Exactly. I wholeheartedly agree with that.
Cool. And just as a FYI to the audience, there's a lot of people, and so a lot of intros and people dropping their portfolios, which is awesome. If you have any questions, we will get to those at the end. Drop them in the questions tab, just so that we can find them. I saw maybe a couple questions dropped in the chat. We'll try to answer everything, but they might get lost there. Cool. I think those are all really interesting and great takes. And now I want to just pull up some portfolios. These are all portfolios that of folks who have been in UX Academy. I think they were kind of rated well as people were coming through when they went to portfolio review process. And they were recently featured in our blog. So I am going, or not our blog, our newsletter rather. So I'm going to share, and we're going to just do, kind of live commenting on some of these, and hey, like why are these working? And then we can we'll get through that and look at some volunteers. Let's see.
I seen an interesting first question, which was almost like a challenge in the question chat. So while you bring it up, I just want to say, someone says, how can we do an in-depth evaluation in 90 seconds? And the answer to that is experience. So we've got 20 years. I don't know how much Jacques has, but I've got 20 years of looking at people's work. I know what I'm looking for. I know what I'm looking for people's roles. It's the same. And what I'm doing is I'm looking to see process, form, no mistakes, type that's right. And I'm doing this in seconds. And I'm spending 90 of those, but I'm probably evaluating maybe about 100 different things in a couple of seconds every time I'm looking at something. And so what the answer to that is experience. That's how we do it in 90 seconds, because we can and we have to.
And Chrissy, you brought up something which is both obvious and worth mentioning, which you said, like, no mistakes, like, not that, like, that's not the end all be all, but it's table stakes, right? Like, and it makes a lot of, if you see a mistake right out of the gate, it's just, you're not getting past that gatekeeper, right? So edit, put things through Chat GPT to make sure that the writing is clear, if you feel like you need to. You just can't have mistakes because it's a competitive market.
If 10 seconds in and your title says UX dib designer or something like that, like they've spelled it wrong, like you're straight up within 2 seconds, you're eliminated straight off the bat. That's what I'm saying.
One thing before we kick off to this other portfolio here, what I like to add on to that. One thing that I often do is I take the time to see if they built their portfolio responsibly, because that's important to me. As someone, if we're looking at entry-level UX portfolios, then I want to know, have they learned about responsiveness, and do they know how to make their portfolio look fine on tablet and mobile? Did they take the time to do that, or did they design it in Framer and upload it in one breakpoint and call it a day, right? That extra level of detail is how I know that someone spent the time to put the craft together.
And someone cares enough to do it.
Yeah, exactly, right.
That's a great call out. All right, let's jump in. We have a couple of these. I'm just gonna, if I pan down, does that pan down? Let's see. Oh, it does. Okay. So here's one. This is a UX Academy grad. I believe that they are currently in a role. I'm just going to kind of pan down here, and Chrissy or Jacques, tell me if you want me to stop somewhere or click on something.
So maybe I'll tell you a couple of things she did right straight off the bat at the top.
Yeah.
She told me straight off the bat what she is. She's a digital designer. She's also added a bit of uniqueness. She says she's a user advocate. Then she bolds out exactly what makes her unique. She's got a degree in psychology. She's got teaching experience. She's got a name. She's and an owner of a bakery. Okay, that one flags a little red flag. I have to be honest for me, because I'm like, how much attention can she give this job if she also runs a bakery? But that would be some things I immediately thought within the couple of seconds you brought it up. What about you, Jacques? Whenever you seen it?
Right. Yes. That's something that I often think about, even for myself. Like, if you have when you mentioned the ownership of a bakery being a red flag, we all have the right to have like side hustles and side gigs, right? So there's a certain balance where you don't want to index too heavily on your side gigs, because that might make the employer think that you don't have time for the actual job itself. So definitely something to consider.
And interesting, I've read that like this is a person who used to own a bakery. Maybe I assumed that you couldn't do that and work full time, but
yeah, you could.
And that being an entrepreneur is actually like it's interesting, right? Like most people aren't, and probably gives them maybe a level of business acumen that somebody who hadn't been an entrepreneur might not have. But clearly, would be hard to be a business owner and a full-time employee at the same time.
If I was adjusting this for her, I would say previous owner of a bakery.
Yeah.
Make that incredibly explicitly clear.
Mm-hmm. Agree. No, but I agree with you though, Cam, that having the business acumen of owning a business, maybe in the past or in the present, it does tell me that this person has like some kind of grit to them, some scrappiness, and they have initiative. That makes me think, oh, this person sounds like they have some type of drive to them, and I'm more interested to hear more about them.
Cool.
Just so that you know, I always click on the first project. If I have any pull from any direction, I always pick on what do you want me to see first, and that's the one I click on in the portfolio, by the way. So for anyone else who's wanting that advice, make the first project your best one, because if I only spending 90 seconds and I'm just looking at one, then you best make it your best one. Yeah, there's a couple of things she does really nicely there at the beginning, which is she zooms in on a couple of details that were up at the top. And she also shows, so she's got this as a high level view as a first image. I can immediately see exactly the kind of things that's on here. It's Montessori. For example, I have a kid, so I know that. And then it's like a couple of progress and things for the Montessori app. Great. I'm scanning the background for Montessori, but I'm looking now for the problem statement. And I'm not quite seeing it yet. So I don't know what problem she's solving with this at the moment. Oh, here we go. Now I've got the problem. So I want to understand, does she understand the problem at this point? Does she know what she's solving for? Because actually UX designers, I don't know if you agree with this, Jacques, but we're in the business of solving problems. That's what we do.
Precisely.
So does she know what she's solving? And then I liked here when she zoomed in a couple of those details, and then she's going into the goal. So everything so far is green flags for now, and I'm not seeing any immediate problems. There's a little bit of the hierarchy of text there going on that's maybe a little wrong between the research, understanding, and competitive analysis, but I assume that research tab that she's got above there is actually like a section of research, and then everything under there is about that piece. So maybe I'm going to pause talking and let Jacques say something.
For sure. And as we said before, I tend to look at the portfolio in different breakpoints and see how it looks. So I'm looking at it on my mobile device right now, and I do see some areas where she's done a good job making sure that the images fill up the full width of the device, right? But I do also see some areas where the layout maybe wasn't the most optimal for mobile. So, I would definitely keep that in mind.
Cool. Yeah. Well, we're doing quick first impressions here, so we're going to go right on to the next. I think I have to do that.
If she was applying for a job at ING, one thing I would say is That's a mobile baby app. So what I would do is I would probably go there for about 10 seconds, and then I would leave and try to find something in a financial space or desktop space away from mobile design, because I want to be sure that she can design for desktop. So that would be the next thing I would do, by the way, just in case anyone's wondering. First project, mobile, great, but it's not really my field, not what I'm in. So I'm looking to see a project that's like that. Anyway,
so here we have and so I mean, I think great point, which is that, you know, the other piece is not just one size fits all. That's something maybe a great first impression for one role and not for another, right?
Yeah.
It happens to be that she works in education, so I think that makes a ton of sense. But maybe less of a fit for financial services firm. Here's our next. I'm just going to scroll down.
Yeah, I like that she put her location in as well. So she's in Arizona based, which means that if she's applying for Arizona jobs, then it's going to make sense. If she's applying for a job, for example, in Amsterdam in the Netherlands, then I know that we probably are not good. That's not going to work.
One thing that I would like to say about this portfolio is that she's using background color to section out the page sections. So that's nice, because it's not just, you know, a big, long, continuous stream of consciousness. She's using these little white containers to contain the case studies. And if you look at it, if you scroll down a bit and you reduce the width of your, keep scrolling down just a tad bit more. There we go. So there we go. So if you look at this, you have your main case study, and then you have the smaller ones. So she's putting priority on that first case study because she knows that was her best performance. And then the lesser case studies, the less relevant ones, or maybe the less polished ones, or down below. So I think this is a nice way of doing hierarchy on your projects.
Yeah. That's a really good point. And she wants you to look at Egmont.
Egmont? Let's click on it.
Egmont. She wants you to look at it. So, you know, it would be rude not to, right?
Right, yeah.
Right, so I see a couple of things straight off the bat at the top here that would be a small red flag, which is some of that logo's hitting the edge of that phone, for example, quite close. So if I look at the paw of Egmont, it's quite close to the top there. So there's a little bit of a spacing issue that maybe a more senior person wouldn't have had, for example. So I can already see, maybe, and I can see there's some problems with the logo. The bottom menu in that top area, which was a home menu. See, even though you were fast, I still caught it. See that the white button and the black home menu is out of alignment, and I see it straight away. So I'm like, okay, so I've caught that, and I go, and she's put that in large size on the first thing on her portfolio. So and her so I'm thinking maybe a little bit of not as attention to detail orientated as maybe I might like, maybe. But I like her jazzy colors, so maybe that's.
One thing that I like about her case study here is that she's using typographical hierarchy. So she's using, you know, font size and font weight to kind of give section headers and then go deeper into that context. And at the bottom, if you take a look at the very bottom, she has a button to the full prototype.
Was it way down here?
There we go. Oh. So there's definitely some spacing here. So she could use some negative space here between that last area and the next case study. Maybe a little divider line would be nice. But I think you know, outside of the alignment issues here, I like that she provided a link to the prototype so that if I wanted to play with it myself, I could. And then I could really see what is her level of attention to detail and what does her craft look like if I can play with the prototype. And if I'm trying to scroll with the prototype and it's not as I might like, then I know, okay, this person may not be as sharp at prototyping as I might hope. So I like that she provided the link to that prototype.
I also really like that she, what I also really like to see, she hasn't got it, I think, yet, but I like to see little videos of the flows so that I don't have to go and click it. I'm maybe slightly different. I don't want to have to. I will if I have the time and I think it's worth it. But I like someone to show me the flow. For example, I'm seeing all of these screens at the top here. I'm not sure what's being clicked on in the flow to actually go between these screens. What am I clicking on to go to car? where am I getting these item details? The order history, is that button that was in the bottom of the left? I actually just want a little video showing me that so that I can understand how she's built the interaction, because right now it's a little bit of a black box with how that was put together.
I completely agree. I always recommend to my career services students, like we showed that below where that said that button that says check out the full prototype. I always recommend to my career services students to put a video screen recording, like you said, walking through the prototype right above that button, so that if they don't have time to click on that button, they can look at the video. But if they do have time, then there it is.
If I could high five you through the screen, Jacques, I would.
There you go.
Cool. Well, to keep things moving, we have quite a few volunteers, so I'm going to try to pull some of those and I'm not just going to go in order, but I will pull our first volunteer, who is Shelby, and let me see if I can.
I'm going to answer one of the questions in the chat. Someone says, what percentage of portfolios do we view? I have worked with recruiters. They give me a list that's about 10% of the people that apply. So I usually get 200 applicants for every job that I post, and I review 20, 25 portfolios. And from that selection, I select about 5 for interview. And out of that selection, 2 of them make it through to the second interview. And then it's a choice between 2, just so that if anyone's curious about the process.
Cool. So I'm pulling up the first portfolio, and Shelby, I don't know if you're primarily a graphic designer, which, well, I assume you are, as opposed to a UX designer, but perhaps we can use some of the same, and for some of the others, maybe I'll focus on people who are particularly focused on UX or product design. But I think for this first one, we could probably use a lot of the same ways of thinking. So I'm just going to page down here.
So there's a couple of things I see straight away that maybe would be things I might adjust or change, just to help you if you're going for a non-graphic design based role. So the first one is, I think the gradient and the yellow is quite aging of the portfolio. It kind of dates it quite a bit, especially some of the font usage maybe as well. And I can see that there's some pixelation on the font. So I don't know if that is because it's an image rather than text. So these are small details that you might want to fix or adjust, especially around the top of those L's and B's of the Shelby. I can see, and there's banding on the image of the gradient, which tells me it's a lower quality image. These are things that we notice straight away within 1 second, 2 seconds, that makes it look like the attention hasn't gone into actually your header straight away. So I would actually redo your header and tell me exactly how you want to position yourself, and maybe get rid of you've got 2 logos for yourself as well. You've got Shelby, Schoonover, and that double S. Just pick one. You don't need the 2. So I would also pick one of those out. If we go down, I don't know what your role is in those projects. For example, it says Boots US app strategy. Actually, I'm from the UK. I love Boots, by the way. Boots is a great brand. But I don't know what you did. Is this a mobile design? Is it just the graphics that you were doing? I think the context is missing a little bit about what you were doing. Was it just the illustrations? I see loyalty, but were you designing the loyalty program or the content inside it? I have a lot of questions as to how this is structured, and it needs some details inside it explaining exactly what the problem was and what you were looking to solve here. So maybe I'll pause and let Jacques also give his 2 cents on it.
Yes, you took the words right out of my mouth when talking about the hero here, about the gradient and the font choice. It does make it feel a little bit dated. But when I see this here, I'm wondering, is this a former graphic designer / illustrator who is trying to transition into UX? If we're looking to hire for a UX role, that was what my first thought would be. And I would say, okay, that's fine. I even came from graphic design background and transitioned into UX. So I would not disqualify you for that. However, you need to brand yourself for the job that you're applying for. So if you used to be a graphic designer and now you're trying to become a UX designer, then put that as your self-branding and your hero, and call yourself that, own it. And that would make me say, okay, I'm looking at their work. I see that they used to be graphic design, but I can clearly see that they're trying to break into UX. And so I'm not going to disqualify them. I'm going to give them a shot. So that would be my first thought. If you scroll down, though, if you look at some of the mock-ups, to add on to what Chrissy was saying about the design kind of feeling a little bit dated, is if you pause there, look at those drop shadows below where it says gate D2 and A5 and C8. The drop shadows, the heavy drop shadows are also an element that makes designs look quite dated. It kind of reminds you of like Photoshop back in the day. Like there's a certain era where heavy drop shadows were really popular. And if you see that today, then that does make your design look a little bit dated.
Cool. Well, we're going to do it a little bit rapid fire because it's about first impressions.
Mm-hmm.
Hopefully that's was helpful. I am going to pull up the next one somewhat randomly. Let's see here.
I'm going to answer one of the questions. My own point of view on having separate folios for design or fashion, for example, I would actually separate them out. Because if you combine them into one portfolio, it tells me that you maybe have a split focus, or it's not really your first love to do design, or you're not really going to enjoy it as much as working in fashion. So my own personal feeling on it, and maybe other people feel differently, is separate that out and give yourself another name. You know, if I was doing it, I would have Chrissy Welsh as my UX portfolio, maybe Christine. I also have another name because I'm married, Tigalovan, as my fashion portfolio, and I would just have two different personas for each one. Okay.
Cool. Moving on to the next. I'm going to botch this name. Ikhtiar.
There's a lot that's clean that's quite nice. I'm not sure about the moving text across the way because it was difficult to see. Is that I would have to stay here to see, is this everything that's coming? So I'm not sure.
So the first thing that I noticed is the parallax effect and the lazy loading. Parallax effect is really fun and lazy loading is fun, but when there's too much of it, it can be a little bit overwhelming. So I would say, use it sparingly to add some flair to your portfolio, but don't use the parallax effect and the lazy loading for the whole page because it slows me down. If I'm trying to quickly, like we said before, 90 seconds, scroll through the whole page, if the whole page is lazy loading every element one at a time, then it makes it really hard for me to scroll down the page really fast.
Yeah. Also in this portfolio, if he was applying for a job with me, there's a lot of mobile design in here. And again, not a lot of desktop design. So for me, it would be hard to have this is like a profile for a mobile designer almost, but it's positioned as a product designer. So I would be, I might even, if you really go in on mobile design, just call yourself a mobile product designer because that's what your portfolio is telling people, unless you want to put some more desktop design in there.
The one thing, again, just having looked at a lot of portfolios, I do, and as a marketer and thinking about, writing and copy, I do see a lot of this type of copy. And it's the first thing you see, it's the biggest thing you see. And I ask the question, is it doing a lot of work, right? Like in terms of telling people something that's important that you really want them to know. I mean, I think people certainly want to know. People are passionate about what they're working in, but I wonder if there's a version that positions this person and differentiates them a little more using that kind of really prominent real estate.
I think he's really trying to position himself because he's got UX designer, but he's also got product designer, and then he's got it in the bold. He's got a different title saying designing with passion. I almost feel like those three things need to be a bit more cohesive. Like just, if you are in that UX designer, put it in your big title and just say, I'm a UX designer focused on mobile, working in this place, and your USP, bring it in there, and maybe just make the language a tiny bit more cohesive. Maybe, I don't know. That would be something I think about. I do like seeing the problem statements. That's something I like.
One thing that I'm noticing, if you scroll up just a tad bit, or just pause there, look at the navigational links there. You can't see the text on the nav right now because there's the graphics. So I would recommend to put like a background back there. And even if you scroll to the very top, you could have an invisible graphic or an invisible background behind your nav. And then when you scroll down, then have the nav have the color fade in. And that would be a way to have that visual treatment that you're looking for while still having accessibility with the text contrast.
Yeah, I'm also a bit curious because when I had to look at a quick scan of that mobile section that you just flipped past, it kind of looks like it's just using the template design from like we have this in Holland called Thuisbezorg, which is home delivery basically. It looks a bit more like one of those templates. So I don't know if it's all his own design or not. It puts a doubt in my mind because it looks so much like our delivery, a really common delivery app in the Netherlands. I'm sorry, maybe I'm the only one that has that feeling because I'm from the Netherlands. Even the icon is, I think, the Thuisbezorg moped thing. Okay. I do like this though, where he's got some of the market information.
Mm-hmm. That is nice.
I like seeing that. That tells me that he's understanding the space in which he's designing in.
Mm-hmm. And the competitive analysis is nice. If you scroll up a tad bit where we saw Shake Shack and the other brands, it's nice to see the background work that went into it, the process, right? I think that portfolios, one thing that I think about often is portfolios have different things in them depending on like how deep you are in your career. I would say, you know, as I've gotten deeper in my career, the things that I focus on in my case studies are a lot different than than what we're going to see in like an entry level designer portfolio case study. So,
yeah.
The entry level, we really want to understand, do they understand the process? Do they understand the fundamentals? But like when you're interviewing for like a senior level, that's a given. You should already know the fundamentals. Now I'm looking for different things. Now I'm looking for business understanding and acumen and like cross-functional collaboration and all those like soft skills.
Yeah,
well, go ahead.
You know, someone had asked if it's is there a preference in calling yourself UX or product or any other title? It depends on the job. These are different jobs. Service designer does something very different from a UX designer and a product designer and a visual designer. And these are all different kinds of roles. And a researcher and a UX copywriter, they do different jobs. So the preference would be align the job to your skills and call yourself that.
I'm pulling up another one, randomly selected here.
Well, I definitely know her name. I'm not going to forget that font type is big. Kara's got some big text. We like that. But her picture, she's got such big text, but her own little face is almost apologetically small in the middle there. It's like Kara, but she's tiny.
Is that the cursor?
This is the cursor. Yeah, this.
Wow.
Yeah, it's fun when they do it, when they do little fun elements like that. So there's straight away, I've seen one thing at the bottom, which is the blue text on black background. We'll keep going a little further down here on that logo on the left. So that's an accessibility problem, which tells me that maybe she doesn't understand contrast ratios for background and foreground. So that would be something I would look to check, and maybe one or two other pieces of work. That does she have this in other places where she hasn't corrected the contrast ratio?
One thing that I do like here, if you scroll to the top, where was the link to her LinkedIn and resume? I saw that somewhere.
Oh, there
you go. Okay, there it is. Okay, so one thing that I would say here is we kind of had to look for it. I saw it when we scrolled past it briefly, the LinkedIn and resume, but I often will try to make that a little bit easier to find. So sometimes what I've done in my resume, in my portfolio in particular, is I have the navigation links, but then there's their text links, but then there's an actual button in the navigation that takes you to my full resume. You can download it, so you don't have to go looking for my resume. It's already there. So maybe instead of hiding these LinkedIn and resume buttons, maybe find a way to integrate it into your navigation, so it's easy to find no matter where you are on the experience, no matter how far you scroll down the page.
Yeah. I seen on the hero image, which is different from this one. This one's actually better. On the hero image on our homepage, that NF of the logo was actually hitting the top of the black text as well, which when you go into her case study isn't happening. So it says that maybe she might need to adjust some of those. Yeah. So on here, it's done correctly. If you scroll down, you'll see it on the image. So here on the left, you see the NF underneath the black bar is almost cutting off part of the logo. And if you go into the design, I've seen straight away that that's actually fixed. So it's fixed here, but not there. So here you can see that she's given it space at the top, and then the previous one she didn't. So that's a spacing thing that I would maybe think about adjusting. What I do like is that she's got some beautiful contrast going on with the design. She's got that light peach, dark moment. I do like to see moments of contrast like this, where because it says that you can section areas. It's always interesting for a user to work with this. Again, it's a lot of mobile for me, so I would also check her portfolio again for some desktop stuff, but I'm not going to hammer that point.
Right. I did like the mobile device mockups that they showed earlier on the page. Those are nice and clean. And I noticed that there's a consistency with those mobile device mockups on the homepage. When you're looking at the different case study cover images, there was a consistency between the different ones, which I like to see. That shows that they've thought about the whole experience, the whole site experience, as one whole cohesive experience versus just like one case study living by itself and another case study living by itself.
Yeah, I like that too. And if we were in,
I'm going too fast here. But maybe I thought we could do one more, and then we could tack as many questions as we can get to. And let me reload this. I think there's something going on when.
So straight away with this one, I really like the novelty of it. So even though, there's a lot going on in this kind of a design. I'll have to see how that works if I was navigating through it, but I wouldn't forget it. So if you wanted something that's a bit more memorable, I wouldn't forget this. So I would definitely spend some time clicking around in here, and I would have a look at that exponent piece, because that would be one of the first things, and Reforge, because I'm looking to see some of the Reforge looks like it's a presentation template that she designed, actually. Presentation design. Yeah, so she created like a template for project management tool. Is that what it was? Yeah, I like the research. I think that's really nice. And the banding colored sections are also good.
Mm-hmm. I agree. This is a pretty unique portfolio, and me just being a curious person, I would actually go, I'm not sure if you've heard of builtwith.com, but I would actually take this URL and put it into builtwith.com and see what it was built with, because I'm curious.
Yeah.
If you put it in that website, it'll tell you like the technology underneath it.
And I see that she's got a business impact section, which I really love to see as well.
Or was that, did I miss that? Somewhere. Oh, there we go.
She's got an analysis. She's got increased retention. She's got user reviews. She's got some quotes on here. Tells me she takes her job seriously about, it's not just about making the thing and then you're done. It's actually about, did you make the thing right? Did you make the right thing? And did you make the thing right? And did you make the right thing? And then that's what I'm looking for. And I like to see this at the end. She would get an interview from me just based on the novelty and the fact that all the pieces of the puzzle of what I'm looking for are kind of in there. And I don't see any major mistakes straight off the bat.
Right. The dark theme is fun, right? And like you said, there's a certain novelty up here, and I would find myself, even if I was in a hurry, I would find myself taking a second to play around with this little area up top, just for a couple seconds.
She might get 2 minutes from me instead of 90 seconds.
Yeah. Now, I would say be careful with the novelty, because the cursor earlier, although that cursor that we saw earlier was fun, I did find it probably a little bit difficult to use, because I wouldn't quite be sure where is the pointer that I'm clicking on things with. Is it going to be on the edge of that rectangle? Remember that cursor we saw earlier? Is it on that rectangle, or is it that little shape in the middle? So I would say, even though something might be cool and novel, is it usable? I don't know. Think about that before you implement it.
Yeah.
All right. Well, we have a lot of questions, and I know we've attacked some of those throughout. But let's just go through them and see how many we can get to in the next 10 minutes.
Yeah, I was a bit greedy answering them as you were pulling stuff up. Sorry.
You still want to see portfolios from applicants for leadership roles, manager, director, and up? And if so, what are the top things you look for? Good question.
Where was that question? Sorry, what did you say?
Sorry. You guys don't necessarily see this. So the first question was from Brianna, who said, do you still want to see portfolios from applicants for leadership roles, manager, director, and up? And if so, what are the top things you look for? So how is that different than someone who's earlier in their career?
Yeah, there I'm looking for strategy, and I'm looking for someone who understands the business roles. Stakeholder management is something I look to see inside my senior professionals. I also like to see a speaker profile, or someone who goes out into the wider audience outside of their own business to talk about what they know. So in those kind of roles, I'm looking for something more than the craft. I assume you have the craft, and I'm looking to see, can you work in the business? Can you develop the business, and can you work with us and the management team that I'm on the strategy about how we go forward, where we place our bets and not. We have something that we call where we have a right to play, so where to play, how to win, and we do that strategy at the moment in the bank. And I want to see that you understand these concepts. So I can speak a lot about that because I hire a lot of these roles, but and maybe I'll again stop myself. I have to keep stopping myself because I can talk for hours. So I have remembered to stop and let Jacques say something.
Yes, of course. And I completely agree with that. And I think I alluded to this earlier when I was saying that the things on your portfolio are quite different if you're applying for an entry-level UX role versus a senior level or a manager, like a people leader type of role. We want to see, as Chrissy has said, things that demonstrate the soft skills. We assume that you already have the hard skills because you should have X number of years under your belt already by this point, since you're going for a leadership role. So I'm gonna assume that you already have those hard skills, and now I'm looking for things that demonstrate soft skills, like leading a team. How do you provide feedback to your stakeholders and to your people that report into you? Like what are your leadership qualities? Like what are your leadership principles? And showing how, like, can you take business requirements and take technical considerations or constraints and come up with a solution? And how do you demonstrate that you came up with that solution? So yeah, I agree with what you said.
Can you run the team, basically?
Yeah.
You're going to be running teams.
Right.
You're going to be playing hardball at executive level. I'm expecting you to be able to do the presentations at the boards. Like, can you do these things?
Right. And did you lead any workshops? Did you facilitate any types of cross-functional, cross collaboration type of forums? Right. Like, I think those are definitely like the next level type of challenges that you face outside of the hard skills.
Yeah, but these are not things that you're going to learn in Designlab. These are things that you will be learning on the job as you go, and you will have to, as you move up through, you progress through levels, and they require a different set of skills. And maybe you have to go do your MBA or your business degree or something like that after. Maybe not. But yes.
A bunch of questions, because we probably can't get through all of them, that are asking really about, I see how much process work, if any, do you look at, how in depth. So like, a lot of questions about how detailed case studies should be, how much is too much versus how little is too little. There's probably not a one-size-fits-all answer to this question, but I guess any guidance around depth, and balancing, having enough and not boring people to death, or having so much that nobody's going to read it anyways.
Do you want to go first?
I'm always going first. I actually thought I'd pause here, like, go.
Yes. Well, I would say one thing is, even if you do have a lot of information on your portfolio, there are ways to make it more navigable. So you can have quick links in the top of your case study that have different sections. So like Chrissy mentioned, if you're interviewing for a research role, and you might have some quick links to the different parts of the UX process from this particular case study. And if I'm interviewing for that research role, I'm going to click on that jump link and go straight to that section and read about that particular part of your case study. So I think adding jump links or something to make it easily navigable makes it less of an issue that you have a lot of content. And I know that Designlab does require you to have quite a bit of content before you graduate. So, that's something that I always recommend.
Yeah. One of the things I talk to my students about is controlling content on the horizontal rather than the vertical, which means you can keep going vertically down and create these big long pages. But when I talk about controlling content on the horizontal, what I'm meaning is, can you group your user interviews, your affinity maps, and your insights into one piece that goes across the way rather than always up and down the way? And when you can control the content across the horizontal rather than on the vertical, what happens is your pages become a bit smaller, but if someone's interested in that section, they will stay in that section, and then everything is there for them. They don't have to scroll, they can be in there. So you can control it with tabs, you can control it with carousels. These are all really smart mechanisms. You control it with expanding boxes if you want, but there are ways to put the right amount of information on there and still control the page length so that the detail's there, but the length doesn't have to be impactful. And so I talk to my students about doing that, and that's something that's just good practice in general.
Great. I'm just looking. A lot of questions. I'm trying to summarize some of these. How do I showcase impact or success of projects if it wasn't launched? Whether this is because I don't actually work for the company. In this case, they said due to shifting in company priorities. I guess how do you show impact, or I guess a predisposition towards impact when, for whatever reason, I don't have the data, right? Maybe that's another way to ask that question. Any thoughts on that?
Right. Well, I mean, I've been in that situation before where, you built something and it didn't go live. So you're like, how do I put this in my portfolio? But if you did some user research and you have you have a control variant and you did a test and you found that your test variant performed X percent better than the control, then you can say in user research, we had this much of an impact, right? It might not have gone live, but you can still say that in the research study showed that you had an impact. And then you could even, what we do at Lowe's is we often will extrapolate that into a projection. Like a lot of big companies do this. We're like, okay, this user research test turned out this well, and if this thing makes this much money, then we can do the math and we hope that we'll guess that this is going to generate this much for the business, right? You can kind of do some math, right? But if you don't have those numbers to do that math, you can still try to find some way to put numbers in there. Even if you say 9 out of 10 users said this, right? Some kind of numbers. Just find some way to pull numbers out of the data to tell your story.
Yeah, and the easy ways to do that are things like Likert scales that you can send out with surveys, for example, on satisfaction or usability or perceptions. You can ask on a scale of 1 to 10. You can get some numbers out. I work in analytics, so I am all about numbers in design and return on investment for design and ROIs of impactful assessments about what we do. That's actually one of the things I love doing. So I always tell my designers there's no excuse to not having the data around what we're doing. You should not be designing blind. And even if it's user tests, like Jacques was saying, you should be getting some data out of it. If you're designing without doing a test, you're not going to get hired because you're basically just designing for yourself if you're not actually putting it out to anyone to look at it. So hopefully that helps.
This is a quick question, I think. How do you feel about adding a picture of yourself to your portfolio? Some say not to do it, others say to do it to personalize. I've looked at both of your portfolios, and I know that both of you have prominent pictures of yourself, so I'm assuming you're pro, but any thoughts, or, does it matter?
Mostly doesn't matter. I say it's always nice to do it because one, I have fallen on both ends I have fallen on the end of the spectrum. People think I'm either too young or sometimes or too old for some roles, and I've fallen in both of those things. I actually started putting my picture on things to look older. I don't know if anyone's aware of that. Like, I wanted to look older so that I was getting the senior roles. So I started using my pictures to add some of my age, because I've been doing it for 20 years and I wanted to show that I've got 20 years of experience. The problem was I started when I was 18, right? So now I've got this issue where I wasn't getting the senior roles that I wanted. And what I did is I used my picture to my advantage, which is I deliberately tried to make myself look older so that I put on the shift dress. I didn't put the jeans and a baggy t-shirt and a hat on. I wanted to look like the professional that for the jobs that I wanted. And so that's what I would say also about your portfolio. You've got to dress for the job you want. If you're going for entry-level positions, it's fine to wear your jeans and your t-shirt. If you're going for senior positions, don't wear jeans and t-shirt. And I would say just position yourself accordingly with how you present yourself to the world. Okay, I'm going to stop.
That's a great point. I think it also, go ahead.
Oh, no, go ahead.
I was just going to say that was a great point, Chrissy. And also it depends on the industry. So some industries are a little bit more open than others, right? So if you're applying to a banking type of job, right, those jobs are a lot less forgiving when it comes to personal style and creativity and having pink hair and stuff, right? But I've worked in other companies where everyone had cool colored hair and ripped jeans and t-shirts, it was a more design agency, ad agency type of environment, right? So I think it completely depends a lot of times on the industry that you're applying to.
One last question. I know we're just at time. How often should a professional review their portfolio, remove older projects? What is the shelf life of a case study? Does it matter? Can great things stay up there forever, or do you think that they need to be rotated out? How do you approach kind of the age of the material on a portfolio?
That's a really good question. I would say it depends, because some things are some things that are still relevant. For example, the work I did at Philips is now going to be about 8 years old, but it's still in use. So it's still being used. So therefore, it's still on there. So I think it just depends. I say you kind of get a feel for your own work when it feels dated, but maybe that's a bit of a cop out of an answer. So maybe Jacques, you have a better answer than you just feel for it.
Right. No, I can definitely attest to this because I'm on my I've made previous portfolios before my current one. And if you look back at your old work and you kind of cringe at it and you're like, oh, I can do way better than that, then maybe delete it from your portfolio or make a new one, right? If you can see the difference in your craft night and day, and you wouldn't want that to be out there, and you don't think it's an accurate representation of your current skill set, then maybe it's time for some new case studies.
The one caveat to that I'll say is sometimes you can be overcritical of your own work and everything is cringy and horrible and you hate everything. It's not the case. Don't be so hard always on your own work. But I think you're right. You get a feel for when something you cringe at it too hard. And maybe you let it go.
All right. Thanks so much. At that, someone asked to paste some of the links of the things we've talked about. I know many of them are in the chat because they're from volunteers, but I'm going to go ahead and paste as many as I can find in the next 10 seconds. But thank you so much to Chrissy and Jacques, our panelists. I know there were a lot of questions that didn't get answered. I tried to, there's a bunch of links, get to as many of them as possible, but I really appreciate the turnout and the enthusiasm, and thanks to Jacques and Chrissy. I think it was a super insightful and helpful session, and I hope even folks who didn't get their portfolios critiqued took away some things from this. And last thing I will share is just again, if you are interested in whether it's transitioning careers or taking one of our advanced courses, you want to save $100. New Year 100 is the code. You can use it for any course through Jan 31st. And at that, thanks so much. And I'm going to end the event. Thanks, Chrissy and Jacques. See you on the flip side. Thanks, everybody.
Thank you so much. Okay, bye.
Thanks. Bye-bye.